City was quiet, but not in a peaceful way, more like the kind of silence that warned of danger. Vine hurried through the dark streets, hugging her bag close because her car refused to start, and now she was stuck, walking home alone after her late night shift. Then a voice came. Before she could react, someone stumbled into her path, collapsing right at her feet. Vine gasped. Her eyes widened when she saw the man soaked in blood. Vine. Oh my god. Are you okay? She knelt beside him as he clutched her shirt, trying to breathe. Help me, he said weakly. Her heart pounded. This was bad, really bad, but leaving him here, not an option. Fine, let me call an ambulance, she said, taking out her phone. But then she heard someone. He must be close. Find him at all costs. Vine's eyes widened as the man who was speaking coming in her direction. Jungkook looked back at the man and clenched his teeth. Vine understood what was happening. Those men were following him, but Vine doesn't know if Jungkook was a bad person or not. Vine, can you walk? He nodded weakly. She looped his arm over her shoulders, steadying his weight, and they walked to hide behind a big water filter. Vine held her breath when the man walked past her, trying to find Jungkook. After the men were gone, Vine looked at Jungkook. His eyes were closed. Vine, hey, are you okay? Wake up. But he was unconscious. Vine, what do I even do? She sighed and looped his arm over her shoulders again and dragged him. Every step felt dangerous, but she had already made her choice, and either it was instinct or her habitual kind behavior that told her that this choice would be worth it. After tending to his wounds, Vine watched over the unconscious stranger. Hours later, his eyes fluttered open, and the first thing he sees in front of him was Vine's face. His eyes widened as he asked, Where am I? Vine, are you okay? It's my apartment. You were followed by some men and asked for my help. You remember? He attempted to sit up, wincing. Jungkook, I need to leave. Vine, leave? You can barely sit up. Jungkook clenched his jaw, trying to stand up, but failing. His body tensed in pain, his hands pressing against his wounded side. Jungkook, I don't have a choice. They're looking for me. Vine exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. Vine, yeah. And what happens if you step outside and collapse again? Who is going to save you then? His eyes locked onto hers, calculating, very. Jungkook, you don't understand. Vine, you're a bad man, aren't you? A tense silence stretched between them. Jungkook's gaze flickered to the small apartment. Modest, warm, too normal for someone like him. Finally, he let out a small, slow breath. Jungkook, it's not safe for you to be involved. Fine, you're not replying me, so it might be true. But considering how you didn't hurt me, or just want to leave, I can imagine that you're not dangerous, right? Jungkook's eyes widened. Before he could say something, she stirred, walking to the small kitchen. Moments later, she returned with a glass of water and a bottle of painkillers. Jungkook eyed her warily as she handed them over. Fine, take these. Then you can leave in the morning. He hesitated, but the exhaustion in his body won. But he didn't take the pills. It could be anything: sleeping pills, drugs, anything. Wine watched as he leaned back against the couch, his breathing still uneven. She grabbed a spare blanket and tossed it over him. Wine, don't take the pills if you don't want to. Just rest, Jungkook. Why are you helping me? She shrugged. Didn't you ask me to? His brows furrowed, like he wasn't used to people doing things without expecting something in return. She turned off the lights, heading to her bedroom. But just before she disappeared behind the door, she paused. Fine, if you wake up in the middle of the night and try to sneak out, don't bother. I locked the door. Jungkook let out a dry chuckle. You're strange. Fine. Good night. She shut the door, leaving Jungkook staring at the ceiling. He exhaled, his mind racing. This wasn't supposed to happen. He shouldn't have dragged a stranger into this. But for the first time in a long time, he felt safe, which was dangerous. Next morning, Vine walked inside the house, holding a grocery bag in her hand, and she froze when she saw him standing by the couch. Vine, you're up? What, Jungkook? I'm leaving, he said while buttoning his shirt. What? To run right into the people who are looking for you, right? Great idea. Jungkook's jaw clenched. Jungkook, I don't want you to get involved. Before he could complete, there was a knock on the door. They both went quiet and looked at each other while the door knocked again. She turned toward the front door, her pulse quickening. Another knock happened, which was louder this time. She stepped toward the door, her fingers hovering over the lock. A male voice came. Miss, we know you're in there. Open the door. His breath caught. It was them, the same people who had been chasing him last night. But she didn't know it. She was about to open the door when his hand clamped over her mouth. She gasped, but the grip was firm, strong. She was about to fight back until he spoke. She stilled. His voice was a whisper against her ear. His body pressed behind hers as he kept them hidden behind the door. Fine muffled. You, Jungkook, don't move. Outside, the knocks turned to panting. Man outside. We have questions for you, miss. Open the damn door. Jungkook's grip on her loosened slightly, and he moved just enough to glance towards the door. Fine turned her head slightly, their faces mere inches apart. Fine whispered, what do they want, Jungkook? Me. Fine. And what do I say if they break the door down? His dark eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. Jungkook, you say you don't know me. Fine. And if they don't believe me? His gaze flickered down to her lips for a fraction of a second before he leaned in just a little closer. Jungkook, then I make sure they don't walk out of here alive. A shiver ran down her spine. That's when she realized she shouldn't have involved herself in all of this. But now she had no other choice but to follow along. Man outside. Let's go. She's not alone. Their footsteps faded, and after a long moment, the hallway felt silent. Jungkook waited. Only when he was sure they were gone did he finally step back, releasing her. Wine turned to face him, her arms crossing. Wine, you're dangerous, aren't you? Jungkook let out a breath, his lips curling into a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jungkook. Depends on who's asking. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. Fine. Great. So now I'm having a criminal in my house. What a luck. Jungkook. I never said I was a criminal. Fine. You never said you weren't. He smirked again, stepping closer and closer towards her, until she finally had to take steps back. She forgot that if he was a criminal, he could hurt her too. Her heart pounded in her chest. To be continued.